Tiger fans, welcome to another episode of the official Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club podcast, bringing you all the latest news, updates, and buzz surrounding your mighty JSU Tigers. I am the Corey C. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of all future episodes. Apple Podcasts and Spotify video users rate and review the show. And everyone, go follow Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club on Facebook and Tiger Talk 1400 on Instagram and Twitter. It all helps the cause, which is the I love Jackson State University. And it is a very, very special week, obviously homecoming. And we have a big time opponent coming into town, a first time opponent. And all of our listeners have been hearing about this team for actually a couple years now. And surprisingly, they are on the schedule. So we had to bring on someone to talk about this awesome ball club, this awesome program led by longtime and former NFL player coach Mike Minter. He is the play-by-play voice of the Fighting Camels, none other than Chris Hemeyer. Welcome to Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club.
Hey, Corey, thank you so much for having us. And as excited as you guys are, everyone in Campbell Nation is excited as well. We wish Jackson was a little bit closer. Bowie's Creek
Absolutely.
to Jackson, it's as far away as it sounds. But I know so many people are going to be watching and listening.
Absolutely. You guys can expect a packed house. We have a 60,000 seat stadium and tickets are going fast. They may be sold out for what I'm told. They're close to selling out. So it's going to be an awesome atmosphere. Looking forward to hosting you guys. And of course, it's our homecoming. HBC homecomings. It's a show. It's something different. Excited for you all to experience that. Now, I'll be honest, typically for homecoming, most teams like to schedule a cupcake, a team that they can get beat pretty handily because we want to enjoy the festivities and not have to worry about the game. But kudos to our athletics director, your athletics director, for what I'm told, reaching out, talking about it. Not only did we make it happen, we made it happen on our homecoming. So it's going to be a battle on the field based on everything we know about both teams. So we're looking forward. But this is your program is very intriguing to us. It's like they just caught the world by storm. It's kind of similar to Jackson State. Obviously, we've been known in the South and in the SWAC, but as far as nationwide, Coach Prime comes in, and now it's kind of the talk of the nation, similar to Campbell, especially when you talk about on the FCS level. So I guess if you could just get started by just talking about so far how your season has gone.
Yeah, no doubt. And for a little bit of history there, because you say they're parallel programs in a weird way over the past couple of years. Campbell has just had a football team in the modern era. We had one back at the beginning of last century until about the 1950s or whatever. But this is just the 15th year of the modern history of Campbell. And 10 years of that, Corey, was FCS non-scholarship football. Wow. They were in the Pioneer Football League. And so it was kind of an incubator and a great way to do it. So we've just been a scholarship FCS program for 5 years. Mike Minter is nowhere near as famous as one of the most famous athletes of all time in your Coach Prime. But from 1999 until the late 2000s, if you were a Carolina Panthers fan, and there are a lot of them out here, you knew who Mike Minter was because he was a great interview with the media, and he was a starter in our secondary for 10 years. Those were years where Carolina went to the NFC Championship game 2 times, went to the Super Bowl once. So he is well known around here. And how our program, because of him, it's been a slow build, but how it's gotten on the national scene is we kind of did what you guys did 2 years ago when you did all the recruiting because of Coach Prime and what Jackson State had to offer. You were the #1 recruiting class in all of FCS 2 years ago. Well, Campbell was the #1 recruiting class in all of FCS last year. They've been building towards this year. They have some good older players, but they have some injection of youth of some really good guys, 3-star and 4-star guys that they've never had here at Campbell before. And so far, so good. Campbell is 4-2. Their only losses are coming on the road at top 25 ranked William and Mary. That was a 16-point game where our usually steady quarterback threw 3 interceptions. It would have been a lot closer than that had it not been for that. And then going to FBS ECU for a game that Campbell lost but was in the first quarter. So this is, again, a test of a top 25 team, most likely a better team than William and Mary. Campbell thinks with a new offensive and defensive coordinator that they have the kinks worked out, and that's why they are looking so forward to this game. Campbell's receiving votes right now in the FCS polls. Obviously, if they're able to beat or hang with and make a close game to Jackson State, then Campbell would be in the FCS rankings for the first time in program history.
And you talked about the recruiting. Jackson State was #1 in recruiting, and here comes Campbell. So I'll be honest, we thought we had the FCC recruiting scene on lock as far as holding down that #1 spot. Here comes Campbell out of nowhere. So we're looking like, wait a minute, what is going on here? So I talk about you guys have a loaded roster. 10 players voted to the 2020 Big South preseason All Conference team. Talk about how Coach Mike Mentor has been able to assemble such a collection of talent. Now we'll get into some individual names later. But Coach Mentor and his staff has done an exceptional job of building a program. I think there's double-digit 3-star or higher commits already for the 2023 class.
Yeah, well, Coach Mentor can get in a lot of doors just because he is a well-known NFL guy in this part of the country. But they had an amazing plan to get the #1 FCS recruiting class. Before last year, they didn't get within the top 50 in FCS. And what Coach Mentor did was, now that they were a scholarship program, he needed more talent. He went into his coaches. Just imagine this. A year and a half ago, he went into his coaching staff and says, I want the #1 recruiting class in all of FCS. That was the challenge that he brought to his guys. And his recruiters and he had a fantastic plan. What they did was, it didn't matter if you were a 3-star, a 4-star, or a 5-star. If we thought they fit the Campbell program, they went after them. Whether they were in California, North Carolina, Florida, New York, in the Midwest, they went after them. And with the transfer portal, as you know, and as we have seen around the country, hey, the Power 5, even the Group of Fives, they would rather take their chances on a guy that was, let's say you're a Power 5 program in the Big Ten. You're going to take the all-conference running back who was at the MAC last year, other than maybe the 4-star that's from right down the street in Columbus. So a lot of these Power 5s and Group of 5s who had been on these 3 and 4 stars early, they kind of pulled back after they got some transfers. And there was Campbell, who had been with these guys from the very beginning. Mike Mentor said, hey, much like Prime did, I've been in the NFL. I have connections. I know what it looks like to be an NFL player and what it takes. You come here to Campbell, we'll get the scouts to come see you. We will get you into an NFL camp. And he said, you know what? You can go down the road to the South Carolinas and the Clemsons and to the places and be another part of many banners hanging up, or you can come to Campbell and do something that's never been done before, and that's go to the FCS playoffs and win a conference title. So he was on guys early. He sold guys on, you can get to the NFL from Campbell, and why don't you come here and start something amazing?
Yeah, and when we follow Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club, we follow college football recruiting very closely. Obviously, Jackson State recruiting, we know who's been offered, where they have offers from. So, and we obviously Coach Prime and his staff, they're offering those 3, 4, and even 5-star players. Of course, landed the #1 player in the entire country last year. But when we look at the recruits or the players that we're offering this year or leading into the 2023 class, we're noticing a ton of them have an offer from Campbell, and we have a big recruiting weekend coming up. A lot of players will be there on official visits, on unofficial visits. So wouldn't be surprised if some of those kids already have an offer from Campbell. So it'll be an opportunity for them to see. I don't know if that's a good idea for us. They get to see you as well, and we're recruiting some of the same guys, but it's great for FCS, definitely.
Yeah, and no doubt. And I think, Prime and Coach Mentor both really know how good FCS football is. And again, these days you can get to the NFL from anywhere. And it's like in Jackson State's history, they have proven that time and time again. You guys have 4 Hall of Famers that have been through so many NFL draft picks. And I think it's great that guys like that, Mentor and Coach Prime, are bringing this back and saying, hey, you can get such a not only great education, but a great atmosphere and some great football at the FCS level. And that's why this is going to be such a fun game, because it's kind of like what you guys are doing down there in Mississippi in the South. Campbell's trying to do the same thing out here on the East Coast.
And speaking of the game on Saturday, we kind of touched on this earlier, but Coach Mentor, he hasn't it's not a secret when he speaks that he's looking forward to the atmosphere of the game on Saturday. And like I said, the HBCU homecoming is definitely a great experience, and he says that he can't wait to experience it for himself as well as for his team and his staff. A lot of his players come from areas that have an HBCU imprint. So you talked about it as well when we first spoke about coming on the podcast, but what's the buzz been like at Campbell in anticipation of this game?
Man, it's been incredible. Obviously, people know about Coach Prime and what Jackson State has done, but the fact that they're a top 10 team as well. This is really an opportunity for Campbell to see how good they are. Other than the FBS game against East Carolina, this, much like you guys, this is the toughest game on our schedule. Now, look, it's not going to affect you guys in conference play. It's not going to affect us in conference play, but it is a measuring stick in a year that has been built up for Campbell as their most talent in history. The year where they could do so many things that have never done before. This can be one of those games. Look, the Big South has changed a lot. There's only 6 members in the Big South this year, and so winning the Big South doesn't quite have the shade that it's had before. But what it does have in it is the fact that this non-conference game can really show, okay, hey, Campbell is backing up that FCS #1 recruiting class with the fact that they're going toe-to-toe with the best in the country. But like I said, I wasn't lying to you when I'm saying there are some people that are going to make their way all the way to Mississippi from here in North Carolina. But I tell you what, like, everyone is a buzz about this game. It really helps too, and that's great timing on your guys' part that Coach Prime was on 60 Minutes after all the NFL games on Sunday. An incredible interview, really going in depth to what he has done there. It's so much more than football, and I don't have to tell you that, but I think that showed the rest of the country, hey, maybe if you didn't know or just thought he was kind of doing this and building recruits, he has a really, really good team. And so for the fact that Campbell to come in off the backs of that, this opportunity is just golden for the Camels. And this is, again, just the 15th year of FCS football in the modern era, and just the 5th year of scholarship. So there hasn't been a lot of buzz around a lot of games, but this is the most anticipated game in Campbell's history.
Wow. So impressive what Coach Mentor has been able to do in such a short amount of time. Talk about only having 6 teams, but still, when you want the top team in the conference expected to win the conference. So talk about the identity of a Mike Mentor team. I mean, when they're executing his game plan and looking like the team that he envisions, what does that look like?
Well, on offense, he wants to play fast, and it's interesting because as I get prepared for the broadcast that we're going to do on radio on Saturday, man, the 2 offenses look a whole lot alike in formation, in how much that they want to run and getting up into the line fast. That this offense had a goal at the beginning of the year. They haven't quite got there yet, but they want to snap the ball with 30 seconds left on the play clock. And there are some times that they get very, very close to doing that, much like the offense for you guys are the same way. We have a pretty darn good quarterback too. He's a dual threat in Malik Williams. Many on the FCS scene have forgotten him a little bit. He had a fantastic freshman year in 2019. He was a freshman year in the Big South Conference. COVID happened. Campbell didn't play a conference season that year. They played 4 FBS games in the fall, which is a big reason that they got on the national radar as well. And then last year he was hurt for the majority of the year. So here comes an all conference type talent that has now matured. He's a leader on and off the field, and he has a lot of weapons. They can go 4 or 5 deep with their running backs, all guys that can catch out of the backfield. And receiver wise, they have Easy Anderson, who is a Iowa State transfer. He is one of their main receivers. They have a lot of other good pieces, some speed pieces, and then they have a tight end that's going to end up, if he's not drafted, in some NFL camps this summer. His name's Julian Hill. He blocks as well as any tight end in the country. And going into last week, he was Campbell's leading receiver. He's that guy that you can get in the red zone. He's that guy you can get when you need to pick up a third down. Offensively, they are really, really strong and tough to stop. And defensively, much like Coach Prime, he was in the secondary. Coach Minter in the secondary. They play hard, they hit hard, and they're not afraid to take you on man to man. They really will come at you. They've got a very good defensive line. Brevin Allen is a defensive end who's going to end up in an NFL training camp coming up this summer. He's the preseason player of the year. He had, Corey, last week, again, against a Robert Morris opponent who was 0-5 in their rebuilding. I understand who the competition is, but Brevin Allen had 3 sacks and an interception before halftime. He didn't even play the second half, and he was the Big South Conference Player of the Year with that stat line. So Campbell is loaded and excited. You notice I haven't mentioned any of the freshmen from this FCS recruiting class, and
Loaded
that's
class.
what's so fun about this team. These are guys that they're bringing in that are maybe not starters, but on the two deep, but they have that depth. So when guys get tired and when guys are trying to go up to that pace, here comes guys in from the backside that are 3 and 4 star guys that are starting to get their feet wet and making an impact. So Campbell finally has depth for the first time in this football program, and that's why they're winning, and that's why people are so excited about it.
Yeah, and you talked about the similarities in the offenses, in terms of tempo. Both offenses like to play at a certain pace. I think they rate the paces that the offenses go at from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, and both are at a 4. So that kind of gives you an idea of how they like to play. Probably the biggest difference is the run pass ratio. Jackson State's probably 70-30 pass. Yeah, you guys are probably 60-40 run, but nevertheless, a lot of talent. And you guys are really getting it done on the ground. Overall, as an offense, averaging over 419 yards a game, but on the ground, impressive 190 yards rushing per contest, and then 30 points per game. So let's go back to that junior signal caller, Mr. Hodge Malik Williams, 1,400 yards passing to go along with the 8 TDs. Really strong completion percentage as well, 64. So it's safe to say that he, makes those safe throws and he's pretty accurate. But he looks, as I watch him, as equally as effective on the ground, the second leading rusher on the team. So a true dual threat quarterback in my eyes. So just talk a little bit about what he can do from a dual standpoint.
Yeah, Corey, you said it all right there. He is a dual threat, and he's an FBS talent. Originally out of high school, he signed to go to Army. Army was running the option. He went to prep school for a year, an Army prep school for a year after high school. He liked the program. He didn't think the military lifestyle was from him. Campbell had been a team that had recruited him out of high school, so he called them up and he found a place here at Campbell. He is a dual threat, but as he has aged and gotten older and wiser, he will use his feet at a last resort. They don't really run him that much on any planned runs because, again, he is so valuable to this team, and that was what made him so unbelievably dangerous. He stays in the pocket. He has a huge offensive line that he's behind. They average 6'5", 350, which is really FBS caliber, and that's what, as you said, paves the way to the run game. But then Hodge, he can not only stay in the pocket, he can buy time for his receivers if things break down. And then if things really break down, he not only can run for a first down, he's broken off in his career 20, 30, 40-yard touchdown runs, always keeping his head upfield as well. So that's what makes him so special. He's not a run-first quarterback. He's a dual threat that can do it with his feet, but he kind of holds that for the last resort.
And going back to that impressive running game, your leading rusher is Mr. Bryant Barr, 4.4 yards per carry. He's a grad student, if I'm not mistaken. But I talk about that backfield. Is he the main guy? Is he getting the bulk of the carries? Is it by committee?
Yeah, he'll be out there at the beginning, but Campbell this year has what they call a stable of backs. They have 6 guys that they feel comfortable with. Two of the guys that are probably 5 and 6 on the running back depth chart would start anywhere else in the Big South Conference, but they have so much beef behind him. You'll see Barr to start. He's had 2 100+ yard rushing games already this year. Nakari Rogers is a 3-star true freshman, one of that great #1 FCS recruiting class that you'll see. And then they have a hammer for the red zone. Lamaje McDowell. He wears #1. He's a big kid, 6'2", 230, a lot of between the tackle speed. And he's somebody that you'll see to come in for the red zone. So you have a couple of guys that are shifty, that can catch balls, that can make cuts. And then once Campbell gets into the red zone, they're able to hand off to McDowell that can just kind of get you like a battering ram. And then if things aren't going well for them, they have 4, 5, or 6 that they feel pretty comfortable with as well, kind of guys that are a little smaller in size that can go all over the field. So that's why rushing wise, they feel so good about themselves, because they aren't a one-dimensional team. And hey, let's be honest, for those that don't know, Mike Minner, he was a back-to-back national champion for Tom Osborne and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So he knows about the run. If it was up to him, he would run every single play. He has too much talent to do that. So especially if Campbell were to get a lead, which I would be very shocked if this isn't a close game coming down to the wire. But if Campbell gets a lead, they can shift down on the speed of that offense, and they can run.
Mhm. And with that running game, let's go back to the offensive line. You talked about it. That really stands out immediately when you watch this ball club, the size of the offensive line. So you guys are unlike most FCF teams in just terms of being so massive up front. I know you go 6'7" at a tackle. I think you go 6'8" with McClellan. Granted, he didn't play last week, if I'm not mistaken, but nonetheless, some of the biggest linemen we've seen all season, and we'll see for the remainder of the season. So one thing, and Coach Prime talks about this, he was asked this question, just to kind of show you where we are from a recruiting standpoint. Someone actually asked him about playing Alabama, and it was a serious question. So first of all, just imagine that, right? Can you just imagine that question being a serious question? And Coach Prime said, no, we're not ready. He said, give me a year or two. He said, because we need to, right? That's crazy, right? Give me a couple. He said, give me a year. But we need, basically in a nutshell, he said we need to bulk up front, because that's the biggest difference between, an FBS team or an FCS team and an FBS team. So typically when a SWAC school or any FCS team goes up to the FBS level, that's where they're kind of outmanned, the size and then the depth in the trenches. When we talk about the skill positions, we can typically compete. But from on the SWAC level, even when we go up to play a higher tier FCS school, a lot of times we're outmanned in the trenches. We typically don't go to the playoffs because we have a celebration bowl. However, FAMU last season, they had such a great season, top 25 team. The only loss was to Jackson State by 1 point. So they got a bid for the playoffs, but they didn't fare quite so well. So that's typically one of the things that kind of separates us. So we noticed that we don't have any similar opponents, but you did play an NC Central. We don't play them, but that's an that's an HBCU, a team that we could potentially play in our celebration bowl. We're leading that the pack to probably represent the MEAC. So we saw you guys kind of dominate them from an offensive line standpoint. So just talk about how huge that offensive line has been for you and will need to be for you to compete ultimately in the playoffs, if that's where your goal is.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's something that Coach Minter, again, knowing that if you are going to win a conference championship and if you're going to go deep into the playoffs, which is what he wants to do, that you're going to need an offensive line like that. So he challenged his guys in recruiting to go out and get some big guys that can move. And he's done a great combination of not only homegrown guys, and this is for the whole team, but the offensive line too, homegrown guys, but also transfers. He's getting not only high level FCS transfers, but FBS transfers, Power Five and group of guys to come here because he says, look, man, if you still want to play in North Carolina, if you still want to play in ACC and SEC country, but for whatever reason it didn't work out, like, hey, the scouts will come and see you here. And we can do that. And again, like Mike Edwards, who is a mountain of a man, 6'7", 355. He started his collegiate career at Wake Forest. Didn't like the coaching staff. He's from North Carolina, so he found a home here. He's a guy that's gonna end up in an NFL training camp coming up this summer. But that big line is what has helped us go toe to toe. I mentioned it a little bit how Campbell had, like everybody did, that disruptive 2020-2021 season where a lot of teams played in the spring. Campbell went out and played 4 FBS opponents in the fall, all on the road. All those games got on national TV. It paid for Campbell's new locker room, which was one of the things it did. But with that offensive line, Campbell lined up and had bigger offensive lines than Coastal Carolina, had bigger offensive lines than Wake Forest. And that really opened his eyes of, hey, we can compete with these teams because we have to have the size. Again, he knows running the ball is what's going to separate you from a good to a great team. And he's been doing that. And it's such a luxury to have. And not only are they big guys, they're big guys that can move. This year, Campbell got a new strength and conditioning coach, a new strength and conditioning program. They knew they were going to go fast. So these big fellas, the 6'7", 355 guys, they were running sprints and doing conditioning nearly as hard as the skill guys. So not only are they big, they're in shape, and that's what's really helped this offense go and dominate late in games.
Interesting. And, of course, we've talked about the run game and the offensive line opening up those holes and that being a strength of the team. But when offensive coordinator Anthony Whedon needs to put the ball in the air, who are some of the guys that Williams looks to? I know you mentioned the tight end, but who are some wide receivers as well?
Yeah, definitely. Ezariah Anderson, he was an Iowa State signee, ended up going up there to Ames for a couple years. He was on the radar of Oregon and Missouri, so that's the kind of talent he is, 6'5", 210, and he has really gotten used to this offense and is a great target. He's big and has really good hands and can burn. Jalen Kelsey, Speaking of NFL guys, his father was Keith Kelty Sr.,
Okay.
a national champion back in 1996 at Florida. His brother played for the Pittsburgh Steelers for a little bit, man. He's a burner. He's a guy that should be at an FBS program right now, but has found a home here at Campbell. And Jai Williams is a Coastal Carolina transfer, a guy that has been in this program in a couple years, and he's a great speed guy and a possession guy as well. So you have three guys you feel really, really confident in, and a tight end that can block and catch just about anything. So that's what is so good about this Campbell team. There's been a lot of balance, and they're having success. They've had 4 straight games now of over 400 yards of total offense. One of those games, as you mentioned, was against NC Central. That was a top 25 ranked team, undefeated, and doing really, really well. Had beat a ranked team this year, and Campbell bludgeoned them 48-18. And that 400 yards was also picked up against Campbell's only FBS opponent this year. At East Carolina was where that streak cost. So against FBS teams, Campbell, because of, as you mentioned, that offensive line that gives their very good quarterback time, and with these skill guys, some that have played at an FBS level before, some that maybe should be at an FBS level right now, they're able to go toe to toe.
Yeah, and that NC Central game, I think that's the game that really opened up a lot of eyes in terms of Jackson State fans. Now, diehard fans already knew when we saw Campbell on the schedule. We already knew, but some opponents, some fans didn't know. But when they saw you guys dominate NC Central, they were like, "Okay, wow, this is a real team." So we talked about offensively, but defensively as well. Campbell's allowing 25 points a game, giving up about 356 yards, but a lot of nice pieces up front. Everything seems to start with your All-American defensive end. I knew you would mention him before I could. Brevin Allen, the Big South preseason defensive player of the year. That's a name that you hear over and over, whether you're in the stands, whether you're watching the Camels on TV, or just listening to a press conference or an interview. And then there's the former highly recruited 3-star defensive lineman, Paul Hudson. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's C.J. Tillman. He was a Phil Steele freshman All-American linebacker. I think he leads the team in tackles. A 4-star true freshman. You talked about those freshmen, but one that's stepping up and making an impact is a safety. And he, I think he had an offer where you flipped him from Arkansas. So again, a bunch of names, but talk about some guys on defense that are really making it happen for you.
Yeah, and we'll start right there. The highest rated recruit ever to come here at Campbell, Miles Rouser, and you can tell it doesn't matter if you're a 3-star, 4-star, or 5-star. It takes you a little bit of time to get used to the speed of the college game. He came off the bench for the first couple games, and then in that ECU game again against a pretty darn good FBS opponent just down the road here from Campbell, he started to step up. He's a guy that in a couple of the full scrimmages in summer camp, when he would get an interception, whether it was at the 20 or the 50, and he got at least one a game, he would take it back to the house. That's the kind of talent he has. As Coach Minter says, those stars really, really make a difference. So he's been anchoring the secondary back there. They've been playing him at Rover a lot to really let him kind of move and let his talent come up. And you mentioned the defensive line that has been so good. So many people at the beginning of the year paid attention to Brevin Allen, that the other defensive end, Josh Johnson, who's a heck of a talent and who started at an FBS program. He's a guy that has been getting a lot. So now opposing offensive lines are having some trouble because they have 2 defensive end. C.J. Tillman, who you mentioned, who was a All-American. He is a tackling machine, and he has stepped up and gotten even better as a sophomore. But again, I'll point to the fact that this being just the 5th year that Campbell has been a scholarship program, for the first time in this program's history. And what's really making a difference is the defense, especially in the second half. If you look back in the history of these past 5 years of Campbell football, it's been the second half. It's been the second halves of the season where Campbell has fallen out because simply they don't have enough guys, and they haven't been able to build the depth through recruiting because they've only been a scholarship program for 5 years. But this is where some of those freshmen and some of those other guys that have been developed, when Campbell goes into the 2 deep, they can switch out their entire defensive line and you don't miss too much. And that's saying a lot. And that's something that Campbell hasn't been able to do before. And while they're able to keep up this pace and keep up with teams and win games in the second half.
Yeah, that depth is noticeable. And just when you just look at the accolades of some of the players, 10 players voted to the Big South preseason all conference. We're talking about guys on offense, guys on defense, and special teams as well. I think that's a unit that's often overlooked, but solid on special teams. But one final area that I want to talk to you about before I let you go is the secondary. If I, and this is on the outside looking in, if I was looking at this team and kind of seeing some areas where we could attack, I would probably point to that secondary. Now, I know Coach Mike Mentor is the secondary guy himself, so we know that he wants that unit to be on point and sharp. But just talk about the play of the secondary.
Yeah, that's where the game's going to be won. Quite frankly, you know it, especially with what Jackson State has done passing wise. As I've said, they are, they are not a young unit, but they're a unit that's trying to come together. But that's another place where they have talent and where I think they're really going to step up. Aaron Maddox, he wears number 0. He started his collegiate career at Colorado. CJ Smith is a Minnesota transfer, and he's a guy that's been injured for most of the year. So the secondary is coming together. You mentioned the fantastic freshmen that are back there. Harrington is one guy, and Miles Rouser, who is the 4-star. They've got the 2 Joneses, no relation, Jonathan and Dimitri Jones, who are both 2 guys out there that have been in this program for a long time. So I think because of injuries and because of a little bit of youth, you haven't seen them come together. But make no mistake about it, these 2 teams measure up equally in a lot of the different areas of the football team. But with your fantastic quarterback and what he has done and what he can do with his arm, that's going to be where the game is won. You're not going to be able to stop Sanders, but are you going to be able to slow him up enough and stop him on 3rd down enough where you can let your offense do your thing? I don't know. I'm never good at predicting things like this because you know how it is too. When you're too close to the game, when you're too close to the teams you're thinking of, something tells me this might be one of those high scoring games. But you watch, Corey, it'll be 20-17 and come down to a last second field goal.
Wouldn't be surprised. This is, again, this is for us. This is the most intriguing game on the schedule. Typically, we're playing teams that we're familiar with. We saw them last season, but it's just the unknown. We know that this team is good, and I'm sure you guys know that Jackson State is good, but it's just time to get it out there, get it on, put it out on the field.
And Corey, you mentioned it, but let's give credits to not only the athletic director but the 2 coaches. The story that I've heard from our end is after Coach Minter was able to secure that number 1 recruiting class. He's like, you know what? Prime had the number 1 recruiting class in FCS last year. We have it this year. He told his athletic director, he said, hey, let's make this game happen. And they did make it happen. This game wasn't on the schedule last year at this time. But it was, and they're coming in for homecoming. A lot of Campbell fans hope we spoil your homecoming a little bit, but Campbell, after a 3-8 season last year because their quarterback being hurt, we're the homecoming opponent not only for you all, but then we go to NCA&T next week back in conference. That game could decide who wins the Big South Conference. Those are the 2 teams Campbell and NCA&T picked to finish at the top of the conference. So when you're 3-8, you become everybody's homecoming opponent, but that might just set up Campbell to spoil a little bit. But we are so looking forward to the atmosphere. And again, I'm getting Campbell known on the national scene. Whether Campbell can come in there and pull in the upset or not, we're already getting a lot of exposure. And I personally can't wait to come and see the atmosphere, which what we hope is going to be over 60,000, which would be the biggest crowd that Campbell has ever played in front of. At East Carolina, there was about 50,000 earlier this year. And so looking forward to hoping we can break that record and play in front of that many in that great historic stadium of yours.
Absolutely. We are looking forward to it. And one final thing, you mentioned Coach Mike Mentor not being as known as Deion Sanders. Well, not many people are as known as Deion Sanders, but
not at all.
Not at all. But you'd be surprised. A lot of Jackson State fans are very, very familiar with Coach Mike Mentor. Fun fact, he played with a former first-round draft pick from Jackson State, Rashad Anderson, with the Panthers. He was drafted in the first round back in 2000. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple months ago, but they were teammates back there in the secondary together. So we tuned into a lot of Panthers games, so we're familiar with him. Definitely a name that we know about. And now as the coach, we totally respect him. So looking forward to it. Again, thank you for taking time out to come on. Safe travels to you and everyone. We're going to host you guys and show you a great time. It's going to be a great atmosphere, and hopefully it'll be a great ball game as well.
Yeah, Corey, we're really looking forward to it. And again, everybody has been so welcoming, and we can't wait to get there. And thank you so much for having us on to let you tell you a little bit about the Campbell Fighting Camels.
Absolutely. All right. All right. Well, we'll see you on Saturday.
All right. Thank you so much.
You bet.